You think you know the story. A town plagued by rats, a mysterious piper in colourful clothes, a haunting melody that lures away vermin. And then, in a cruel twist of fate, the same tune stealing away the town's children forever. It's a dark fairy tale, a chilling warning about the consequences of broken promises and the dangers of greed. But what if I told you that the narrative we know as the Pied Piper is far older and infinitely more terrifying than a simple morality tale meant for children? What if it's a story that has whispered through the darkest corners of human history for over 4,200 years? A horrifying echo from a time when plagues decimated populations, when children inexplicably vanished without a trace, and when desperate communities faced incomprehensible tragedies with no scientific explanation. Because buried deep beneath this seemingly simple fable lies a profound secret, a narrative passed down by word of mouth through countless millennia, a story not just of rats and magic, but of mass disappearance, of devastating ancient diseases, of desperate migrations for survival, of cultural upheaval, and something far more chilling than just a charismatic musician or a mythical trickster. Once you hear the truth behind the piper and the lost children, you'll never see it the same way again. Welcome back, Darklings. Before we unearth the secrets of this enduring narrative, let's begin with the most well-known version of the tale. But listen closely, because hidden within this familiar story are whispers of something far more ancient, far more visceral, waiting to be rediscovered. Every detail, every familiar phrase, every character's action holds a deeper, darker resonance, reflecting a world far removed from our own comfortable, modern lives. Once upon a time, in the prosperous, bustling German town of Hamelin, a terrible, relentless affliction befell its unsuspecting inhabitants. The town was utterly overrun, choked by an unending plague of rats. They were everywhere. In the houses, gnawing through food stores. In the streets, bold and unafraid. In the very beds of the citizens, bringing filth, destruction, and the chilling spectre of disease and fear. The town council, composed of the wealthiest and most influential citizens, found themselves utterly desperate. Their lives, their trade, their very existence was being threatened by this verminous scourge. They offered a hefty sum of money, a staggering 1,000 guilder sto, anyone who could possibly rid them of this horrifying plague. One day, a strange man appeared in their midst. He was tall and thin, with a piercing, almost hypnotic gaze, dressed in a coat of many colours, a patchwork of vibrant, clashing hues, and carrying a peculiar, unadorned pipe made of wood. He offered to solve their unbearable problem for the promised, exorbitant fee. The council, seeing no other recourse, readily agreed, their desperation overriding any skepticism about the stranger. The man then stepped deliberately into the town square, put his pipe to his lips, and began to play a strange, haunting, utterly mesmerizing melody. And as he played, an astonishing sight unfolded. Out from every crack and crevice, from beneath every floorboard, from every dark alleyway, from every house and shop, came the rats. Thousands upon thousands of them. They followed him, seemingly mesmerized and compelled by his tune, as he led them in an unending, undulating stream out of the town's gates and directly to the cold, swirling waters of the Weser River, where they plunged in, one after another, and drowned. Every single one. The town rejoiced with unbridled ecstasy. Their torment was over, their prosperity seemingly restored. But when the piper returned to claim his hard-earned reward, the greedy, short-sighted town council, now seeing the rats gone and their immediate fear subsided, quickly reneged on their promise. They scoffed at him, ridiculing his strange appearance and methods, offering only a paltry sum, a fraction of what they had sworn, or in some particularly callous versions, nothing at all. The piper, angered and deeply insulted by their treachery and ingratitude, simply left without a word, his piercing gaze a silent promise of retribution. Later that very day, on the solemn feast day of Saints John and Paul, a day when many adults were occupied in church or engaged in civic duties, the piper returned to Hamelin. He stood in the silent street once more, put his pipe to his lips, and began to play a different melodia, softer, sweeter, more inviting, but equally hypnotic tune. This time, it wasn't the rats that emerged from the houses, but the children of Hamelin, boys and girls, from toddlers to teenagers, came skipping and dancing from their homes, their faces alight, drawn by the irresistible ethereal music. They followed the piper as he led them, their small, trusting figures disappearing out of the town and towards the imposing Koppelberg Hill. To the horror of any onlookers, the hill miraculously opened to swallow them, closing silently behind them without a trace. All the children vanished, seemingly forever, save for a few tragic exceptions. One lame child who couldn't keep up with the quick pace, one deaf child who couldn't hear the bewitching music, and one blind child who could see nothing of the strange procession. Hamelin was left silent, utterly desolate, empty of its laughter and its future, forever mourning its lost young. Or so the story goes, in its most familiar, chilling iteration. The tale you've just heard, with its specific elements of the rat plague, the multicolored piper, the broken promise, and the tragic mass abduction of the children, is closest to the version meticulously documented and popularized, though certainly not created, in the late medieval period. Its most famous written renditions include those by the Brothers Grimm in their renowned 1816 collection, Children's and Household Tales, and earlier, more fragmented accounts, dating back to the town of Hamelin itself in the 14th century. These medieval chronicles are crucial because they offer a glimpse into the story's historical kernel. However, the fundamental narrative, a charismatic outsider, a mass disappearance, and an enigmatic, catastrophic event doesn't begin with medieval chroniclers or 19th century folklorists. In fact, by the time it reached these esteemed collectors, it was already incredibly, impossibly ancient indeed, a testament to its profound and enduring resonance across human history and culture, a deep memory embedded in the collective unconscious. Folklorists, those dedicated scholars who meticulously collect, compare, and analyze the countless stories passed down through generations, have identified this story pattern as one of the most persistent and globally distributed in human history. While the Pied Piper is not formally classified under a single Arne, Thompson, Uther, ATU, index number in the same singular way as Cinderella or Hansel and Gretel, its core motifs of magical abduction, divine or semi-divine retribution, and mass disappearance resonate with much older mythical and legendary traditions across countless cultures. There are myriad known tales of children or young people being lured away by supernatural beings, fairies, forest spirits, otherworldly musicians, death figures, or vanishing in mass, inexplicable events. These are variations on this core, terrifying theme, scattered across the globe, from the nuanced oral traditions of European peasants to ancient tales found in parts of Asia and Africa. Each version, while adapted to its unique cultural context, its local creatures, and its specific dangers, invariably retains the same chilling core. A mysterious, compelling force takes away the young. And this leads us to the truly astonishing discovery of its profound age. While the precise origins of orally transmitted stories are inherently debated due to their fluid, evolving nature and lack of definitive, fixed written records, linguistic and comparative folkloric studies overwhelmingly suggest that the core elements and deep structural motifs of the Pied Piper tale are rooted in incredibly ancient Proto-Indo-European myths and folk narratives. This places its origins at least 200 years ago, potentially much, much earlier, reaching back into the Middle to Late Bronze Age, a period of immense demographic and environmental flux across Eurasia. This means it predates many foundational written texts, including much of the Old Testament. It was being whispered around communal fires, likely as a profound historical memory disguised as a magical event, or as a terrifying myth of societal breakdown, long before the rise of classical Greek civilization, before the grandeur and might of the Roman Empire, before the great medieval plagues that swept Europe, and became a convenient frame for the story. It is a narrative passed by word of mouth across countless generations, carried through vast human migrations, through the rise and fall of ancient societies, through periods of immense societal upheaval and transformation, and across millennia. And somehow, impossibly, remarkably, it survived, adapting and shifting, yet retaining its terrifying, enigmatic core. So, the crucial question then becomes, why does this specific, deeply unsettling pattern echo across so many cultures and so much time? What deep universal truths about human nature, about our relationship with inexplicable tragedy, about societal obligations, or about forgotten historical events, are we truly remembering when we tell this story today? The answer lies in stripping away the comforting layers of later, more moralistic, or more easily digestible versions, and looking at the older, more primal, and often more horrifying underlying explanations. Let's begin by looking at the chilling backdrop: the disappearance. The earliest historical records concerning Hamelin, dating back to the 14th century, strikingly do not mention rats at all in their initial accounts. Instead, they refer directly and solely to the disappearance of the children, sometimes placing the event precisely in the year 1284 CE. A crucial piece of evidence comes from a stained glass window from Hamelin's market church. Though destroyed in 1660, its details were meticulously recorded before its loss. The inscription beneath the depiction of a piper and children chillingly read, "In the year 1284, on the day of Saints John and Paul, 130 children born in Hamelin were led by a piper in coloured clothing out of the city and lost on the Koppelberg." This core historical canila definite, mass vanishing of childrenus where the deepest secrets lie. It suggests a very real historical event that required a mythical explanation. This leads us to the story's most popular modern interpretation: plague and disease. For centuries, especially since the devastating impact of the Black Death in the 14th century, the rats have been widely seen as literal carriers of bubonic plague or other devastating epidemics that swept relentlessly through medieval European towns. The piper, then, could be a symbolic representation of the plague itself, an enigmatic, irresistible force, a harbinger of death that lures away the innocent and the vulnerable. The disappearance of the children would then signify their swift, widespread death, perhaps due to the high child mortality rate during a pandemic, or even their bodies being secretly disposed of in mass graves to prevent further spread of the contagion. The chilling detail of the Koppelberg Hill opening to swallow them could be a euphemism for mass burial sites, or a desperate attempt to explain an inexplicable and terrifying loss of life. This interpretation provides a powerful, if grim, metaphor for historical catastrophe and the overwhelming power of disease. However, the plague theory, while compelling for later periods, only fully accounts for the rats in later versions of the story. It doesn't quite fit the earliest accounts that focus solely on the children's vanishing without any mention of rodent infestations. This leads us to a much older, more complex, and perhaps more deeply rooted explanation, one that resonates with the tale's ancient origins: mass migration, or colonization. Imagine a time in ancient Europe, during the Bronze Age or early Iron Age, roughly correlating with the story's proposed 200-year-old origins. This was an era characterized by small, often isolated communities. Resources were limited, land was finite, and survival often necessitated difficult decisions. In such circumstances, a strong leader, a charismatic recruiter, often associated with a distinct uniform or a specific valuable skill like a musician or a shaman, would sometimes emerge. These individuals would undertake the perilous task of leading young, able-bodied members of a community, typically the unmarried youths, or those without inherited land, away from overpopulated or resource-strained villages to new, distant lands. This was a brutal but often necessary form of outmigration or colonization, a desperate necessity for the survival of the larger tribe or community. The piper, in this context, wouldn't be malevolent in the supernatural sense, but rather a powerful, highly persuasive figure who offered the promise of a new life, new opportunities, or even just the possibility of survival in a new territory. The luring away by music could symbolize the hypnotic appeal of a promised better future, the alluring call of adventure, or simply the ritualistic journey, accompanied by rhythmic music, chants, or marching songs common in ancient migrations. The children would be the young adults, the unmarried, the most easily swayed, and the most capable of undertaking a perilous, months-long journey to found a new settlement in uncharted territory. Their disappearance into the Koppelberg Hill wouldn't be death, but their irreversible departure into a new, unknown territorial world from which they would likely never return to their original home or see their families again. For the families left behind, their children were lost forever, effectively dead to them, their absence a permanent wound on the community. This explanation perfectly fits the 130 children number and the chilling specificity of the historical event recorded in Hamelin, pointing to a common ancient practice of population dispersal driven by environmental or economic pressures. Furthermore, the detail of the coat of many colours worn by the piper is highly significant. It visually sets him apart from the villagers, marks him as an outsider, perhaps a representative of another group or tribe, or a specific kind of professional whose attire was exotic to the rural villagers. Such distinctive clothing in folklore often denotes a magical being or someone from the other world, but it could also simply indicate a stranger from a different, perhaps more advanced or more prosperous, culture, powerful recruiter from afar, whose exotic attire was profoundly alluring and attention-grabbing to a more provincial populace. Consider also the powerful motif of the mountain opening and swallowing. This is a pervasive element in ancient myths and folklore across Europe and beyond, often associated with the realm of fairies, nature spirits, or the underworld. When the Koppelberg Hill opens to swallow the children, it can symbolize their profound passage into another realm, a literal new land beyond the visible horizon. But for the emotionally devastated villagers left behind, a metaphorical other world from which their loved ones would never return. It's a powerful, almost apocalyptic image of irreversible separation and loss. The concept of broken promises adds a powerful moralistic layer to the narrative, but this might be a later accretion, a means of explaining the inexplicable. While ancient societies certainly valued oaths and contracts, the core, terrifying tragedy of the vanished children predates the specific economic dispute with the town council. It's plausible that the broken promise served as a convenient justification or moralizing framework for an already existing story about inexplicable, devastating loss, turning a historical trauma into a cautionary tale about civic greed and divine retribution. In a pre-scientific age, when mass vanishings occurred due to disease or necessary migration, a supernatural punishment for a moral failing would provide a structured, albeit harsh, explanation that helped process collective grief and fear. The Pied Piper, therefore, transcends a simple cautionary tale. It is a profound narrative about mass disappearance, societal trauma, and the desperate strategies for survival in ancient times. It reflects deep anxieties about unseen forces that could decimate populations, about the devastating loss of the next generation, and about the inexorable forces that could pull communities apart. Whether those forces were disease, the irresistible call of new, fertile lands, or the grim realities of demographic shifts and forced dispersal. The Piper is not just a character, he is a potent embodiment of these overwhelming forces, whether they be disease, the compelling lure of opportunity in unknown territories, or the inevitable, often brutal, movements of human populations across continents. The story resonates so powerfully and endures across millennia because it taps into fundamental human experiences. the acute fear of losing one's children, the agonizing helplessness in the face of natural catastrophe or inexplicable events, and the universal human need to find an explanation, even a terrifying one, for the most profound and devastating tragedies. The music itself is a key, almost magical element, a powerful, almost supernatural force that compels and draws, symbolizing an irresistible, perhaps even fated, pull. In ancient shamanic traditions, music and rhythm were often used to induce trances, to facilitate journeys to other realms, or to literally move people, spiritually and physically. The piper's music, therefore, might symbolize a powerful, inescapable cultural current, an existential urge to leave, or an overwhelming fated force of destiny. So, when we look at the Pied Piper through this ancient primordial lens, it transforms from a simple children's story into a chilling, deeply resonant myth. It's a story about the universal fear of the unknown, the primal dread of inexplicable loss, and the horrifying realities faced by our distant ancestors. It's a tale that has survived for millennia because it speaks to fundamental human experiences, the vulnerability of communities, the challenges of survival, and the endless human need to find an explanation, even a terrifying one, for the most profound and soul-crushing tragedies. The rat plague, the charismatic piper, the haunting, compelling music, the opening, swallowing hill, these are not just elements of a fanciful story, but potent, enduring symbols encoded with ancient wisdom and visceral understandings of the world, passed down from a time when these threats were not merely metaphors, but daily, horrifying realities that shaped the very fabric of human life and human memory. Perhaps this tale isn't fiction at all, but a deep-seated memory, a haunting echo of a time when entire populations, or at least their youth, could vanish without a trace, swallowed by forces beyond comprehension. And the wisest, most crucial lessons were those whispered from one generation to the next, disguised as a simple story about a musician and lost children. And if that thought has you listening a little more closely to the sounds outside your own home, waiting for an unfamiliar, compelling melody to drift on the wind, wait until you hear the truth behind more folklore stories.